All right, we're going to be doing Chapter 2, Section 3, adding and subtracting rational numbers. A couple things you got to know. What is a rational number? A rational number is any number that can be written as a fraction. That is something you should note if you don't know that already. For example, 0.5. That's a rational number because the fraction is 1/2. The number like 3. That is a rational number because it can be written as 3/1. Any number, whole number like that can be written as numerator over denominator of 1. Another one that some people kind of forget about sometimes are repeating decimals. Ones like 0.1 repeating forever, ever, and ever. These can be written as fractions if you remember the pattern or the rule that it's just that over 9. Another cool example is if you take 0.23, notice 2, 3 are both repeating, so there are 2 digits that are repeating. So you just say 2 digits over 2 nines. It is the exact same idea. And then obviously you get the same things as 0.3 repeating. Here's how you can kind of test that pattern is really 3/9, which does reduce to 1/3, which is what you should be familiar with as what 0.3 repeating is. So just a quick refresher on what a rational number is. It can be a decimal, it can be a whole number, and it can be also a fraction or repeating decimal. Today we're going to be adding and subtracting these sorts of numbers. First thing to remember is how would you add or subtract regular numbers that don't involve fractions or decimals. Let's just do a couple quick examples and see if you remember. If you take a number like 1,375 and add that to 256, I would assume you know that you take the 1,375 and you put it on top of 256. What you're essentially doing here is lining up the decimals. So 1,375.0 and 256.0. Notice there's nothing in the decimals, but you are essentially lining up those decimals when adding those numbers together. Adding this straight down, 5 plus 6 is 11, carry the 1. So this column is done. Move on to the next column. What is 5 plus 7? 12 plus that 1 at the top, 13, carry the 10. This column is done. And you do this to the end. 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 1 is 6, and 1 plus nothing is 1, giving you the result of 1,631. How do you subtract two regular numbers? Well, it's the exact same thing, making sure the bigger number, I guess we should say the absolute value, biggest number, should always go on top, whether it be the 5780 or the 2564. In this case, it is the number in the front. 5,780 is bigger than 2,564, so that goes on top. Subtracting these numbers, while again lining up the decimals like such. When subtracting numbers like these, remember you can't take away from nothing, so you need to do some borrowing. In this case, I can't take 4 away from 0, so I need to borrow from the 8. The 8 will turn into a 7 because I only need to borrow 1 from it, turning this into a 10. 10 minus 4 is 6. 7, moving on. 7 minus 6 is 1. 7 minus 5 is 2. And 5 minus 2 is 3, giving me 3,216. So remember, lining up the decimals is very important when doing regular addition or subtraction. Another thing to note before adding or subtracting any sorts of numbers or fractions, or rational numbers rather, is you need to make sure that the denominators of the two fractions are the same. If they are not the same, you need to do some work to make them the same. So in these two cases on the screen, 6/11 minus 3/11 have the same denominator. The number on the bottom is called the denominator. The number on the top is called the numerator. So making sure that the denominators are the same before subtracting or adding. So in this case, we are ready to go. What is 6/11 minus 3/11? That is really just taking in the top two numbers and subtracting them, giving you 3/11 remaining. Another thing you can think about when doing fractional type addition or subtraction problems is a picture. If you had a rectangle broken up into 11ths, and let's say this whole is 11 and you had 6 of them filled in, this represents the fraction 6/11. Now removing 3 of those 11ths, how much is left over? As you can see, you have 3 portions or 3/11 left, which is the same as our answer. So if you do struggle with seeing the fractions, you can think of the pictures as a second option. Down below, 4/9 minus 8/9. Here's an example where you have the denominators the same, however you're subtracting a bigger number. So in this scenario, you do the exact same thing, but just remember subtracting integer rules. Any subtraction problem can be turned into an addition problem. 4 minus 8 can be written as 4 plus a negative 8. Taking a step back at that, you see that you have a different set of signs. Whenever your signs are different, you just subtract the numbers. 8 and 4, the difference is 4. Whatever your bigger number is, that's the sign your answer gets. In this scenario, 8 is bigger than 4, so my answer should retain that negative because 8 had a negative on it. Oops. That was just dealing with the tops. Always make sure you keep that denominator on there. If ever you can simplify, please do. In these two cases, they are already simplified. They are already in simplest form. Here are some rational number examples. Let's begin with the 1.422 plus 0.521. When adding and subtracting rational decimals, you line up the decimals and then add or subtract straight down. So just like before, we're going to take the bigger number and put it on top. In this scenario here, 1.422 is bigger than 0.521, so we're going to put that on top. Remember, we're going to line up the decimals as such, and we will just add straight down. This one is fairly simple because they have the same number of digits. 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 2 is 4, 5 plus 4 is 9, and 1 plus nothing is 1. In our next example, it is very similar. You put the bigger number on top, line up your decimals, and subtract straight down. We will now do an example where the decimal places are different. In this scenario, 11.648 is bigger than 0.5. So 11.648 will go on top of 0.5. Notice I lined up the decimals. What do you do with the remaining open spots? Zeros can go in those spots so that there's something there for you to subtract. 8 minus nothing is just 8. 4 minus nothing is just 4. 6 minus 5 is 1. And 11 minus nothing is 11. Now, please notice that our result is 11.148. However, if you look at our original question, we are taking 0.5, subtracting a really big number. So our result should be negative. We're taking and leaving, adding, changing. We found the difference between the numbers. Remember the rules that state whatever the bigger number is gets the sign. So our bigger number was 11, so our answer gets that sign. Always, 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 before circling or submitting an answer, check to make sure the sign and your answer makes sense. So that is our lesson on Chapter 2, Section 3, Adding and Subtracting Rational Numbers. Good luck!